everyone, I'm Petrus and welcome to WorldView. WorldView is a podcast where we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. If you've watched our content so far and liked it, please consider liking this video, subscribing and donating on Patreon. Today we're talking with Nwabisa Mayema. She's currently the Strategic Partnerships Director at Branson Centre of Entrepreneurship in South Africa. Nwabisa, welcome to the show.
Hi Petrus, thanks for having me.
So for those of you that don't know you, could you just give us a brief rundown of your career? How did you become an entrepreneur?
Oh, that's a strange question because when I became an entrepreneur, I didn't know that I was an entrepreneur. I was somebody who was self-employed, who needed to create a job for themselves. And then I was somebody who owned a business, and sort of 8 years into the whole conversation, I was like, oh, entrepreneur, that's what they mean. That's what I'm doing. But it's important for me to kind of bring that into the fore because I think labels matter. And so the moment I understood I was an entrepreneur, in came this understanding that actually came with the idea of being creative, being a visionary, being able to have permission to fail, and not just wanting to succeed and get the accolades. Because I think we're socialized to just think that there's only one straight route, which is, start here and then be successful. Whereas actually start here, move around a little bit and fail, fall, have fun, and you will eventually get there, but actually enjoy yourself as you go along the route. And so for me, I'm an entrepreneur, and at the same time, I'm an entrepreneur for entrepreneurs, which is a whole other conversation as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's such a great perspective because there really is no one easy route to becoming an entrepreneur. And frankly, I think people probably created that label because it's so difficult to see all of these people coming from all the different backgrounds and the way that they create their businesses and do their own work as self-sustaining citizens. And at the same time, they just kind of like say, okay, we're going to put you in this entrepreneur group. So you're an entrepreneur now. It's a way to easily you block it off in terms of what you do. But it really isn't easy because there's so much more complexity to it. Could you give us a bit of insight to the complexity? Like what's your daily life as an entrepreneur? Like what motivates you? What changes do you want to see?
So I think obviously we're all motivated by different things, but for me, what kind of gives me my sense of like just being is having purpose. And so purpose is my North Star. Purpose is what gives me the reason to get up. And it also is the thing that maybe starts building in resilience. We've all been talking about resilience quite a lot at the moment. And so for me, that resilience is this idea of knowing that I will fail at some point and I will fail at something, but it doesn't mean I am a failure. And so that's sort of my version of resilience. And so purpose allows for that to come into play because it's answering the question of why do you do what you do? Why did you do that thing? Okay, fine. The how maybe isn't working out so well. The what maybe isn't working out so well, but the why exists. And so what motivates me is having a sense of purpose and then understanding that purpose can sit in many different vehicles. So sometimes that purpose can sit in being an entrepreneur, or it can sit in having a 9-to-5 job, or it can sit in your personal relationships and your friendships. But suddenly that purpose is really what then encapsulates your life and allows for you to then live your life how you want to live your life.
No, exactly. And I mean, you've worked incredibly hard. I know you didn't want an intro, but I've looked a bit at what you've achieved across your life. You worked incredibly hard to get to where you are today. And a lot of people that work incredibly hard simply don't get the breaks. They don't get the opportunities. They don't, what they try doesn't succeed. It can be extremely demotivating for those people, as we just talked about it. But you said you're an entrepreneur for entrepreneurs. So in that regard, may I ask the question, what do you think is the best way of elevating those who are disadvantaged, sometimes women, to executive or entrepreneurial positions? I mean, is it a role that the state should play? Is it a cultural change? Is it a bit of both?
So I'll probably be a little bit cheeky in how I answer this question, which is placing the burden of this question on a woman, on a Black woman, on a Black South African woman is not fair. So I don't know because I didn't break the system. In fact, the system doesn't work for me. So I really don't know who should be doing what. The moment older white men come into this conversation, they should tell us what to do. So I can't answer this for you. I've done the work. It's hard enough just trying to get by as one of the more disadvantaged, sort of cohorts in the country and in the world. So I pass.
Yeah, that's an absolutely fair response. I really respect that a lot. In terms of other cultural issues, or rather, let's put it this way, socioeconomic issues. If you don't mind giving your 2 cents about these, you can always, of course, skip them as well. But do you think, because this is a well-documented discussion, do you think that there is a gender pay gap? And what do you believe is the cause of it? And perhaps, I know the older white men should come in and say what the solution is, but what do you think is a solution to this? Is there one, in your opinion?
There definitely is the gender pay gap, so we don't even need to debate that or argue about it. It's there. I think there's something wild about if we were looking at gender at pay parity, women would probably only work for like 3 months of the year because the rest
Mm,
of it is almost unpaid labor when compared to a man in a sort of a similar position. What do we need to do with it, or where does it come from? So I think some of it comes from the unrecognized, unpaid labor that women do. So it starts off with the fact that we don't even quantify what a so-called housewife is doing or stay-at-home mom is doing,
mm,
because that should actually be remunerated in some shape or form or recognized as a career choice as well. It is a job. Um, and so by the time then women maybe are finding themselves in, positions in the corporate world or in the business world, we then forget to also factor in that chances are she still needs to come home and run some form of household or manage some form of housework and that sort of thing. Again, that goes unpaid, which means that it is unrecognized. By the time I'm getting back to work, I'm tired. I can't quite now roll into, the happy hour, the networking, the briars, the golf, all that stuff, because there's all this other unrecognized, unpaid work that's going on, which means I'm no longer performing at work. And suddenly it just feeds into each other. And then that pay gap starts happening. And of course, at the end of the day, the people who then define what is valuable work, what is paid work, what should be recognized, are people who don't participate in that unrecognized, unpaid labor. So yeah, that's where it's at. I'm also going to say that oftentimes as women, we also are our own worst enemies as well. And so we're not necessarily then also demanding to be recognized, demanding that our time is paid for, demanding that men step into the plate in terms of also doing that housework and that, that's house management, and also even declaring it at work that I can't run a 12-hour day and run my house and still then be seen as a performer. You
mm,
need to, measure my performance against these metrics, which are specific to my job description. And whether or not I can make it to the happy hour, the networking drinks, or
mm,
the golf should not be a sign of whether or not I'm a team player or dedicated or not. So that's
mm.
where I would start that conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot of soft metrics that actually like determine how much you get paid, and exactly the way you said it, like the how much you network, who you know, is a massive impact to how you progress in your business, how much you earn. The whole discussion is a bunch of soft metrics which isn't clearly defined. And to some degree, people have made the argument that stipends that a lot of our disadvantaged communities receive when they get children can be a type of way in which women who raise children are paid for their motherhood. But the motherhood isn't determined in that way. And also the quantity in which they're paid is kind of like, I don't want to say arbitrarily defined, because it is defined according to some living costs. But in terms of just keeping the child, alive, fed, and all those details, that's what it's supposed to cover. It doesn't cover her time and effort that she puts in and that she can't put in, for example, a job.
Yeah.
So in that
And also
scenario,
make no mistake, let's also just talk about that just the value of those grants that are being distributed is laughable. The amount of money that is being distributed that is supposedly supposed to keep a child alive is what you and I will spend in one weekend over lunches with friends.
mm,
And so, how dare we even try and bring that into the conversation as a form of compensation,
mm,
remuneration, or recognition of what it means to be a mother in this country and what it means to raise a child in this country? So, I wouldn't even go there in that kind of
mm.
conversation. And so, it's about paid and recognized time and labor that we need to be talking about.
But if people claim that that is what's being paid, then perhaps the conversation should likely be, what exactly does this define? What does this cover? And what is the correct amount that it should, be given? Who do you think makes this decision? Is it the people that we elect into government, or is it something that should maybe perhaps be done by a much larger democratic group that has a perspective on things that they may not even have?
Look, I think we're now starting to play into the conversation and a question around maybe statecraft and statehood and what it
Mm,
means to run a functional state. And so, and for me, this is my playground. I have a degree in political science and public policy.
I know, yeah.
And so I think what we need to have a conversation about is terms of what is a public good. What are the things that need to run well in order for a society to be able to grow? And some of those things cannot even be looked at through the lens of pure capitalism, because we're looking then at public utility and public good. And so things like healthcare, education, safety and security, and social welfare, those are public goods, and those need to sit in the hands of the state, whether we like it or not.
Mm,
Um, every time we privatize those elements, that's a failing of the state actually, and fails us as society. And so now, how then do we decide and define what those quantums are? That then becomes a bigger conversation that's linked obviously to the economy, that's linked to, again, value, it's linked to also the vision. So what is the 20, 30, 40, 50-year vision of this nation state? And so that then becomes that symbiotic relationship between those we elect into power and how we then hold them accountable. And so we actually all need to play a role in making those decisions.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for your input on that. Could I pivot that perhaps to the job that you currently hold? Could you just give me, a rundown on what is this, the Branson Centre for Entrepreneurship, and how does it differ from traditional welfare?
Sure. So we are an enabler of entrepreneurs, and we exist to enable entrepreneurs in a way that's good for people, planet, and profit. And we do this using the Virgin Way. So we're part of the Virgin family. And of course, we follow our namesake, Sir Richard Branson, in terms of just doing things where we're disrupting, but having fun and doing it in a way that's good for everyone. In terms of, do we view ourselves as, purveyors of welfare? No, we view ourselves as enablers of entrepreneurs. And so we run as a for-profit that then, works with other for-profit businesses. My day-to-day job is to run the partnerships for the Branson Centre. So it means that I'm connecting the centre to other enablers, to other organizations, to sponsors, to partners, for to allow for our entrepreneurs to really receive the red carpet treatment in terms of whenever they're engaging with us as part of the Branson Centre. Super exciting, it's super crazy, but it's also really fun, especially because it's almost like I've pivoted my journey as an entrepreneur into another version of being an entrepreneur. So I'm in an entrepreneurial organization that cares and enables entrepreneurs. So it's almost like I sit on another end now of the conversation, having walked that journey as an entrepreneur for almost 15 years.
And of course, given the namesake, do you consider Richard Branson a role model? And I mean, if you do, could you just tell us why, and share with us why we'd consider other individuals role models as well, perhaps according to the same criteria?
Sure. So I think, we alluded to it at some point as well, which is that, to be successful, we kind of think that success is something that happens very instantaneously, and that's because of how so many things move so quickly in our world. But I think we cannot run away from the fact that success comes with the hard yards. And so we look at, Richard's journey has been over 50 years of being an entrepreneur. It's also been a very loud journey where he's actually succeeded, failed, dropped the ball, gone to jail, and just been and very honest about it, including even his background where he's of limited education. He sits with dyslexia. And yet he just keeps on moving because he's driven by that purpose of changing business for good. So yes, I do consider him somebody that I look up to, whom I learn from. I wouldn't have joined his organization unless I cared in terms of who he is, and believed in his vision, and I subscribe to it. So for me, when I'm out there looking for role models for myself, or at least trying to nudge people towards finding out who they want to, model their lives on, I'm like, forget about who's the hottest face on whatever platform that you're looking at right now. Figure out who's put in those hard yards and can tell you a really, really big story about where they've been, where they come from, and also figure out who can be very, very honest about their story. Too many times we've glorified and we're trying very hard to be rock stars in what we're doing, that we forget to also share a little bit about the things that maybe are a little bit embarrassing, the things that we maybe regret. But it's okay. And it's also okay to then also share in terms of the things that completely delight us. And this is why I do what I do, because I want to have fun. So I think that's important to kind of find those more well-rounded people to look up to.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, I mean, it really isn't like a straight journey. It's not the wide, easy road. You just walk down the middle. It's often like the narrow path that has a lot of detours and stuff like that. I'm assuming you have some projects at the Branson Centre that you've worked on that would be just phenomenal stories. Are there any of those that you could share, or just some, perhaps like trends that you've seen for the people that you help with?
Yeah, so also we if I had a swear jar for every time anybody talks to us about helping entrepreneurs, we don't help entrepreneurs.
Okay.
We enable them. We work with what you already have. We meet you where you are, and we get you over the line based on what you've defined to be success. And so that's very important for us to kind of continually clarify to ourselves, but also to the entrepreneurs, and of course to anybody who's wanting to engage with the Branson Centre. It's not about help, it's about enabling.
Mm.
And then in terms of what is it that makes sense in terms of the incredible stories, it's once you're able to articulate your purpose, embed your purpose, and actually even start measuring against your purpose, suddenly a lot of things start changing in terms of how you run your business. And how do you take that was purpose and actually, embed it across your business? So how does your purpose reflect itself in how you express your brand? How does your purpose reflect itself in terms of the partnerships that you enter into? How do you even account for purpose in your finances? And sadly, that changes so much around how you then actually deliver on your business. And that has been an incredible story to actually walk alongside entrepreneurs, to see them coming in, knowing that they're onto something, but then getting to that place of purpose and then seeing them embed that, and then seeing how that enables for their businesses to grow. And now we start talking about people, planet, profit, gaining through our businesses.
Mm. No, I'll be honest, I can only imagine. I definitely think I should go and look at actually some of those stories. I think it'd be, it'd be really inspiring and help you to drive your own business. I know you don't like to talk about awards, but a lot of people, when they have the first exposure of you, is going to be the list of awards that you've won. In the way that awards are a measure for people that don't know who you are, or sometimes the first time they find out from you. Which awards do you think means the most to entrepreneurs, or rather, of the awards that you've won, which ones meant the most to you? Which ones were not just like recognition awards, but really like this is something you would have worked towards if you knew it was? Perhaps could you share some of the stories and the shares of your travels, your world travels?
So I think any award where you are recognized by peers is actually the one that's the most meaningful. Now, every form of recognition, the fact that you even were recognized in some shape or form, it's helpful. Ego is something that every now and again does need to be stroked. So yes, but I think I'm more satisfied whenever a peer says to me, "You did good, girl," and I'm like, "Wow, that's actually the award." When it's a peer, that actually matters the most to me, and I feel like that's not unique to me. I think a lot of us, actually, after some time, when you are being recognized by those with whom you play with, it becomes quite meaningful.
No, exactly. I think that's such a big deal, because really, if your peers recognize it, they've been through that. They know what the struggle
Yeah,
is. They know what it takes. And if they say well done, you know that there's meaning behind it, instead of perhaps other
absolutely.
awards which could be
Yeah.
a bit of a flucker sometimes.
Yeah, and
You
also
know,
sometimes you find that those are the people who've also seen you, they've watched your journey.
mm,
So, I always say, sometimes you have those people whom for a long time you think they were just your good time friends, right?
mm,
And you were
mm,
always just doing good time things. And suddenly for one of your good timers to actually stop, maybe sometimes in the middle of a good time, and they look at you and they're like, "Listen, man, I'm proud of you. You did good." Suddenly that's like, that is a peer who I didn't even know was watching me in this particular way, you
mm.
know?
Yeah. No, exactly. And there's also a scenario where a lot of the recognition, like I said, comes from media in terms of the people that don't know you. And sometimes that's a bit frustrating, because it does feel to a lot of South Africans like the media is generally more inclined towards negative news than positive. And in that way, they give a lot of like statements, especially internationally, where they say like South Africa isn't a place that you should invest. Like there's so many issues, there's so many problems. What can you say against that? Like, what do you say? Why should someone invest in South Africa?
I think South Africa is one of the most exciting places to think about, whether it is from a social point of view, even politically, even in terms of innovation, because any place that has the kind of inequality that we have, and any place that has the kinds of gaps that we have, maybe even in our social systems, and so many interruptions have also happened in this country, it means that in those gaps, so much can come out of it, so much can grow, be it innovation, be it new ways of thinking, be it even leapfrogging existing systems and being like, okay, so we're going to skip that thing that those other people did, and we're just going to do the next thing. For me, I think from a pure selfish capitalistic investor point of view, I'm like, fill in the gaps, and I
Mm,
promise you, from those gaps, there's opportunity. Opportunity is prosperity. So do it. And so that's why I would say it's a bit silly to think about wanting to go down the same old, tired, very safe
mm,
routes.
mm,
nothing, dared, nothing ventured, whatever, what is it? No, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
my English today. But really this idea of sometimes it's necessary to tread where angels fear to tread as well. But it's also the reality is also it's not that bad actually, because a lot of the people are also telling the stories about how bad things are nowhere near the bottom of the pyramid, and therefore they're not experiencing the so-called bad things that are happening here. And therefore it's kind of saying you need to gain some perspective, because actually the entire world is aflame right now. No one knows what's going on. Everybody's just kind of winging their way through it, and so then might as well then wing your way through it at home.
No, exactly. I mean, there's so many stories that I like to focus on of the past 2 years in the pandemic, where people really have, despite some seriously difficult situations, made an absolutely wholesome and inspiring situation work for them, and succeed. So, I mean, you're obviously optimistic about South Africa. I mean, do you think that the future of this country is in the hands of, I want to say that the entrepreneurs, the individual, the one that, makes or breaks it type of scenario, instead of a lot of the other details that people think that should solve the problems, like, for example, the government or the big old corporations that have been here for thousands of years, hundreds of years? What do you think holds the future for our country?
It lies in all of our hands. We all have a role to play in terms of making things work. And so I think every now and again we run this risk of being so binary about what our problems are, and then we become binary about our solutions. And so we keep thinking to ourselves, well, because government couldn't do that, we must take this thing away from government and the private sector must do that. Oh, well, because the private sector is not doing well, we must give it to the entrepreneurs. We all have a role to play, and therefore we all need to get in on the social contract and realize that it's not the other person who's responsible for making something happen. We're all responsible for making something happen on the patch of earth that we're responsible for.
No, it definitely, yeah. I mean, it's. I know you're incredibly busy, so it won't take too much of your time. But I just want to say, as an end off, what message do you have to future entrepreneurs of South Africa, especially those that really aren't in the scenario where they think they're going to get out of the difficult situations that they are? What do you tell them that tells them, like, stick with it, or something that really means it? It's something they haven't heard before.
So actually, I kind of shy away from the very Pollyanna idea of saying stick with it. I kind of go, let's keep it real. And so, first of all, entrepreneurship is a long journey. It's hard yards. And so ask yourself the question, do you have it in you to walk those hard yards? Do you have it in you to even have to absorb some of the uncertainty? Some of us come from backgrounds where we don't have 5 years in which you can't earn, because you either need to take care of family members back home, or you've got to look after yourself, you've got to pay off student debt or whatever. And so if you can't stick with that right now, that's fine. Go do what you need to do to come back into the journey. And so I will never tell somebody to stick with it, because sometimes you also either maybe have a wellness issue where maybe you just don't have the mental capacity to absorb some of the stress of it. That's fine. Go do what you need to do to then, relax, and then try the entrepreneurship, whether then it's a side hustle or it's something that you do a little bit later on after you've saved and that kind of thing. And so it's always keep it real, keep it very, very, very real.
Okay, that's incredibly inspiring. I want to thank you so much. It's been a relatively short talk, but I think it's very powerful, and all that needs to be said has been said. So thank you so much for that. I want to give you a last opportunity to say or plug anything you might want to plug.
No, I mean, thank you so much for this time. And I think for me, it's all about just, can everybody stay well and be well in the meantime? I'm not here to evangelize on people becoming entrepreneurs or any which way. Just do you, keep it real, have fun.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. So for those of you that made it this far, you definitely like the video. And if you agree with what Nwabisa says, please by all means like and share this video. It helps her perspective get out there. And of course, us as a YouTube channel, it also helps us grow and succeed. So thank you so much for watching. This has been WorldView.